Hello everyone, it's me again, back with my suspension calculator to make your life a little bit more difficult when you're adjusting your cars. This is now the fourth time I am trying to make this video because the first one crashed and burned due to the microphone not being turned on. The second went all to heck because of audio sync issues, and the third one went to heck because the mouse wasn't being recorded. So I really want to get this done. Anyway, at the end of my last video I touched upon the subject of digression knees by saying that the values my calculator suggests could end up being too soft. This would be caused by the digression knees of the shock absorbers or dampers. Now, what is the digression knee? Well, simply put, it is the point where the slow damping rate switches over to the fast damping rate. Usually this is a speed of some sort in speed sensitive dampers, but it can also be force in force sensitive dampers. But in Project Cars we have speed sensitive dampers where the digression knee stays at the same point, so we'll only be tackling those at this time. So why would the digression knee affect things so much? Well, first we need to know what our actual proper aim with these calculations is. In the basic version I just put these 60 to 80% critical rebound rates in here as the slow rebound rate, and then use the 70% of 80% rebound as the slow bump, and 35% critical for fast fast rebound, and 25% of critical for fast bump. Now, this is a very simplistic way to do things, but it can work. But the actual proper aim of the system isn't to have 70% or 60 or 80% critical damping overall. It's to have 60, 70 or 80% critical damping at a sort of specific point or a specific area. Now, what would be this area be? Well, like I said, the digression knee is the point where the damper goes from slow damping to fast damping. Now, the reason for this is that slow damping rates are used to control the body motion of the car. That's what happens when you either accelerate, brake or turn. And the fast damping rates are more or come into play when you hit bumps, and that of course depends on the size of the bump and the speed of the car, how big the effect is. So basically what happens when the car is leaning to one side or the wheels are coming up or going down, whether it's due to the car rolling around or you hitting something, is that the piston inside the shock absorber is moving up, either up or down, and that up or down would correspond to the bump or rebound. So if slow speeds for the piston correspond to car body movement, and fast speeds correspond to bump handling, then where is the approximate switchover point? What is the general area we should be looking for when we are adjusting it? Well, based on the literature I have been able to find, it would appear that the sort of magical butter zone of damping where we really want to hit our targets is somewhere around 3 inches per second, or in metric that would be 7.62 centimeters per second. Now these values here, the 60, 70 and 80% critical values, they are in newtons per meter per second. So this 70% critical value for the front damper, for example, is actually 14,218 newtons at 1 meter per second, which is quite a bit faster than the 7.62 centimeters per second. So what if we want to hit, let's say, 70% critical damping at this 3 inches per second? I'm going to use that instead of 7.62 centimeters per second because it's a lot shorter. What sort of damping rates, or what sort of total damping forces at that speed would be looking for? This indeed is the total damping force in newtons at 1 meter per second. It's luckily easy to calculate. We can just hit up the calculator here, and we put in an inch in centimeters times 3 and divide by 100 centimeters, which of course is 1 meter, and then we have 0.0762 meters per second. If we take that times the 70% critical front setting, which is 14 to 18 according to the calculator, we get roughly 1080 newtons at 3 inches per second as the 70% critical rate at that point. Now, what we actually really want to hit with our dampers, if we are aiming for these numbers that I'm putting here, and do remember these are only for baselines and not for getting a perfect suspension. This is a starting point, and after that you twiddle with it until you like it. But personally, I actually find that these baselines usually end up with cars that I already really like, so I haven't really found much use in adjusting the dampers after using the tools I have in the calculator. So, well, how do we make sure we get in this case the 1080 newtons at 3 inches per second? Well, this is where the digression knee comes in. If the digression knee happens to be at 3 inches per second, then obviously the slow damper rate is from 0 to 3 inches per second is enough to handle our way all the way up there, so we can just set the slow damper rate to whatever we want. The game, as you know, uses these newtons at 1 meter per second values, so you can just straight up choose it from there. And if the car for some reason has, let's say, 4, 5, 6, 8 or anything like that digression knees, or rather not many of them, but the digression knee is at 4, 5, 6, 8 or whatever inches per second, then it'll still hit our 3 inches per second target if you adjust it just to the value that the spreadsheet is suggesting. It won't go too stiff. But the problem comes in when you have digression knees that are lower down or slower than the our butter zone value of 3 inches per second. So what if the damper has, let's say, 2 inches per second as a digression knee, or 1 inch per second? Well, that basically means that if we set the slow damping rate to a value that the spreadsheet suggests, the damper will follow that rate up until the 2 inches per second, for example, is reached, and then it will go to the lower fast damping rate, and the total forces at the point where we want it, 3 inches per second, will be lower than we are aiming for. So to prevent that, our options are basically to increase the fast damping so that it's nearly equal to the slow damping, which I really don't like because it makes cars absolutely horrible over bumps, because the total forces in fast movements are insane at that point. But if we want to leave the fast damping rates alone, we will have to increase the slow damping rates even further to seemingly too stiff values. But as long as the total forces at roughly in the 3 inches per second region hit close to our mark, it actually doesn't matter, it's all fine. It's the car will be a little hard on the surface, and it'll, I hope that didn't really properly show up on the video. I'm gonna try to edit that out if it did. But where was I? So yeah, the car will be initially a bit stiffly damped, and it might even respond better to inputs, but it might be perhaps a bit rattly. In racing cars this doesn't really matter at all, so we don't need to care about that. So yeah, well, how do you calculate the combined effect of the slow and the fast damping rates, and with different digression knees? Well, to help you with that, I have made a graphical calculator for my or graphical representation of my calculator, as well as included this here area where you can put in values from the game. So these slow rebound, fast rebound, slow bump, fast bump for the front, and slow rebound, fast rebound, slow bump, fast bump for the rear. They are all values that are straight from the setup you're using in the game. These digression knees are adjustable. If you know what they should be in the car you're adjusting, then good for you, you can just put them in. If you don't, I suggest you start with something in the 2 inches per second region and see how that fits. But yeah, basically you can put the values in there. And also we have this here calculator that instantly shows you the amount of the critical damping rate at 3 inches per second with the current settings that we have selected over here. And yeah, this is not a proper setup at the moment for the BMW M3 GT. It's just something I happened to have when I opened the file. So yeah, I'm actually gonna put these to 0 so that the graphs we are looking at will be a bit clearer at first. So let's look at them. So these first ones here are the graphs for the racing settings, front dampers on the left, rear dampers on the right, and rebound on the top, bump on the bottom. And below that we can find the street dampers, front on the left again, rear on the right, and rebound on the top, and bump on the bottom. And what these lines here are, they are representations of the information we have been using since the first tutorial video. So these are indeed the front racing damper rebound rates on the top, these two blue lines. The dark blue is the setting for a stiff racing front damper, and the lighter blue line is the setting for a soft or a softer racing front damper in rebound. And the dark green line here is or maybe dark brown, I am not completely sure, I'm getting a bit tired. and it seems to be changing the colors around occasionally. But anyway, this line here is the softer racing bump setting. This red line or orange line here is the stiff racing front bump setting, and this dark red brownish burgundy line here is sort of special line that some of the literature suggests, which is the extra stiff bump front. This is actually at 120% critical line, and the main use for it would be in some specific racing series where the cars use tires that need to be worked really hard to maintain temperature and to work properly. So this is not something you would use for every car, only for tires that really need to be worked hard. Otherwise, this would make the front end of the car really stiff, which would detract from grip and make it bounce around more when you're going over bumps. And at the rear we have the same sort of thing. This is the curve for the stiff racing rear rebound, and the green one is the softer racing rear rebound, and the purple line here is the softer racing rear bump, and the darker green line is the stiff racing rear bump. And what these values actually are straight up from here. So the initial slope of this stiff rebound here is at the front is this 80% here, and here is the digression knee. This is where the slow rebound switches over to fast rebound, and it's in the model, or the sort of the ideals I have set in this, and again it's only ideal in a strictly theoretical sense, and when coming up with a baseline, not ideal as a perfect setup, but in that sense of ideal, where was I? So yeah, it switches. It's set to a constant 3 inches per second. So this here is 3 inches per second, and this is basically the target point, or this is, or basically anywhere between here is. So yeah, I really don't have a script, and I'm getting a bit tired, so I may be rambling a bit. But yeah, anyway, this initial slope is the 80% value. After that, where it goes to the fast value, it's this 35% value. This is the softer 60% value here, and after that it goes to the same fast value. And at the bump side, this is the initial slope, is the softer bump value here, the 50% of 80%, and that after that it goes to the 25% value for fast, and the stiffer one is the 70% of 80%, and once again the same for the fast value. And this here is the 120% critical line, and with the same fast setting, and this really is a special case. So it's in there, but it's not really that important, I don't think. The rear end behaves exactly the same way. It just uses the lower portion of the suggestions, because those are indeed the suggested rear rates. The street dampers here are the same thing basically, but they are a little bit simpler. There's no range. There's the sort of the one setting around which you can sort of fiddle with, and they're simply this is the initial slope for the rebound, initial slope for the bump, and the fast rate for the rebound, and the fast rate for the bump, and the same for the rear setting. So it's just that simple. Basically all these lines are just visualizations of whatever is going on here. Now let's go through the setup with car that we could try. Let's try the Ginetta G55 because that was easily my favorite of the GT3 cars I tested lately. I was just, even with the default setup, I was really blown away by how nice it is to drive and how enjoyable it was for a racing car, and just how immensely far I could push it before it really started getting away from me. I still I have no idea how far the limits are. I probably still could easily take 2 seconds off of most of my lap times by just going through the corners quicker. It's that good around the bends. I just really love that car, which is strange for me because I usually don't really like racing cars that much. But anyway, let's use the default setup. The springs for the default are 192 at the front and 157 at the rear. The roll bars don't really matter at all at the moment, but I think they are something like, yeah, possibly like something like this. They don't really matter, they don't enter into this. But yes, here we get the settings, and now we can put in the dampers from the setup. I wrote them on a notepad on a separate screen I have here, so I can just easily put them in here. But unfortunately, if you want to do this, you will have to do something like Alt-Tab out of the game, or write them on notepad or something like that. You will have to cross-reference with the game. These are not drop-down menus yet. They hopefully will be when the game is out and the adjustment regions have been locked down, but right now they are still changing all of the time, and I really don't want to do the work right now because it's really tedious anyway, and likely it would only be applicable for a few weeks at most. So yeah, bear with it. The settings for the Ginetta G55 GT3 defaults are 15800 for the slow rebound, and 7850, 120, and 5210, and at the rear it's 1250, and no wait, 7000 and 9000 and 1485. And I'm working on, just for a first test, I'm trying 2 inches per second. Because yeah, any 3 would be easy to adjust for. Anything above 3 doesn't really matter, because you would adjust it the same way you adjust 3 anyway, and 1 is a bit on the low side as a general rule, so it's best to start with 2, I think. So let's see how it looks like. Okay, now the current rates have current settings have bumped up. So here we have the orange line, which is the current front rebound, and the yellow line, which is the current front bump, and this darker green line here is the current rear rebound, and this sort of dark brown reddish thin line here is the current rear bump. So instantly we can see at least 2 things. This is the 3 inches per second digression knee, and as we can see from the settings we did, these are set up to have 2-inch digression knees, and indeed they digress here at the 2-inch point, so earlier on. And the second thing we can see is that the rates actually all fall within the settings we have laid out, or the rather the guidelines we have. So if we look up here, we can see that at the 3 inches per second the front rebound is 71%. So this point here would be the 60%, this would be 80%, so this is, yeah, it is right around 71%. The bump would be, it's a little bit trickier because it's 70% of 80%. So 70% of 80% is what is it? 57%. Yes, and well, yeah, 50% of 80% of obviously is 40% here. So this would be 57% here, where this line bends, and where this line bends would be 40%. So it's pretty close to the mark here, so a bit below 57, and indeed front bump says 53. So it's pretty close to the stiffer end of the limitations we set. And at the rear we have a fairly soft, this is again the 60% mark, so we only have a bit above 60%, indeed 62, and this again is pretty much in the middle, so between 40 and 57 at 48, which is pretty not exactly in the middle, we're really close anyway. So yeah, we are within our parameters with 2 inches per second dampers. So this alone would just suggest that the default dampers are actually pretty good. If perhaps if anything, the rear rebound could do some stiffening up, but that's not that necessary anyway. And we can also see that despite the 2-inch digression knee here, since the initial slope of the current settings for a slow bump at the front is, we can see it's 12,200, which is more than the 10,400 that the calculator suggests here. We can see that the initial slope rises quite a bit higher up, or quite a bit steeper than the suggestion would, but because the digression knee is here, the fast rate takes over and the total forces end up being a bit below the 57% mark. So this is what I meant, that you should, with a slower or lower digression knee value, you should adjust the slow damping to be a bit too stiff, and don't do too much for the fast damping, so that you can hit the target, which is over here. So overshoot it at first, then take it a bit back and hit the goal like that. So yeah, that looks pretty fine. And then we can also use the calculator to check how it would work if they were 2 inches per second damper. So if it was 3 inches, let's check. So 3 inches for everything, and then we see that the rebound rates are now closer to the top of the range. So it's actually we have gone a bit overboard at the front at 85% total 85% critical total force at 3 inches per second. So yeah, we are a bit above the 80% marker here. It's still not too bad, but it's getting on the stiffer side for a baseline. And the bump is actually significantly outside of the scale. It's the 57 is our target here, and we are already at 66. But then again, if you need to work the tires hard, this really doesn't matter too much. It still wouldn't be obliterated by bumps, and it would settle down really quickly after them, so it's not too bad at all. At the rear, we actually get a lot better rates for the rear rebound. We get 71%, which is right in the middle of the ranges we are working with, or the suggestion ranges at least. And we get an almost perfect hit for the stiffer bump setting, which is not bad at all. So in fact, I think that the dampers may in fact be 3 inches per second dampers, or 3 inches per second digression knee dampers rather. So yeah, that actually looks pretty good. But what would, and it would basically work the same way even if the digression knees were even faster than that. But what if they were slower? What if they were 1 inches per second? So let's put in 1 inch. And now that the graph has updated, we can see that well, the bump settings are still within the range, though they are right at the lower limit, but the rebound rates are going below what we were aiming for. So yeah, this is a good hint that the dampers aren't in this car aren't 1 inches per second, but indeed are 2 or 3 or somewhere in between. Of course, if the car was really bouncy, because a low amount of dampening will lead to a bouncy car, because it takes longer for the dampers to stop the motion, obviously. If the car was really bouncy, this could actually tell us why the car is bouncy, because there clearly is quite a low amount of damping going on. But since the car really wasn't bouncy, it was really good, at least in my opinion. I don't think we are talking about 1 inches per second dampers. So yeah, this is one way of using the calculator. You can just put in the default settings and try out different digression knees to see how the graphs or how the rates line up, and try to get an idea of are the dampers sort of reasonable to begin with. And of course, if you adjust your springs, you will, for example, we have the front end here. If we put the softest front springs in, we can see that the default damper setting is probably too stiff. It's above our limits already at 2 inches. At 3 inches it's high above our range, and only at 1 inch would it be in the middle, sort of. So it's what at this point what you'd want to do is probably take the 2-inch digression knee and find values for the slow rebound and fast rebound that allowed you to hit this general region between here. And same goes for the bump, of course, and same goes for the rear end if you change the rear springs. And you possibly should, because yeah, I won't get into that, but we have a 13% higher rear spring frequency, which if you watch the last video you will know is not really appropriate for a racing car. But yeah, the Ginetta G55 worked pretty well. So let's check a car that doesn't work as well. Casey already noted that the R8 LMS Ultra could use some stiffer dampers at the front, so let's use that as an example. The default setup is 450 springs at the front and 200 springs at the rear, and I don't care about the dampers. By the way, these springs give the car a front frequency of 4.43 Hz and a 19% higher front frequency, which the balance is right for a racing car, but this is really stiff for a GT3 car. If you remember, the Ginetta was only like 3.3 or something like that, and this is easily the stiffest GT3 car in the lineup. But they are actually the correct spring rates for the car, and those are the ones that Audi has listed. So that's just something to note, that Audi apparently endorses really stiff springs, but it's also completely realistic. Personally, I would like something a bit softer like the other GT3 cars, but hey, you can't have everything. So yeah, I also have the default setup and default setup for the Audi R8 Ultra here, so I'm gonna put in the values: 14550, 7850, 24,000, and 7620, and 9400, 4100, 11,900 and 3,975. So at 2 inches per second we'll take a look. Okay, so instantly we can see that the initial slope of the rebound damping is lower than either of the suggestions, which means that no matter what the digression is, it will never be inside our range. There simply is no way around the fact that if we want to get the rebound damping within the range, we will have to increase the slow rate or make the fast rate stiffer than the slow rate. But like I said, that will make the car horrible at high speeds over bumps, so I really want to avoid that. And this is the same for the rear as well. But at the front, with 2 inches per second, we actually get really good looking numbers. We are exactly hitting our or very close at least, we are hitting the 57% at the front bump, 57% critical at 3 inches total forces, that means, and 54% present at the rear, which is really good as well. So it would appear that the dampers are indeed 2 inches per second, digression knee dampers, at least for the bump, but they could be 1. Let's see what happens. Let's put in one here. So they are still within our ranges at 40% and 39%. So that's right on the bottom edge of our range at 40% roughly. So it's possible that they are 1 inchers, but they would be quite soft 1 inchers if they were. I don't think that's what is going on, so I'm going to assume that they are 2 inches. By the way, if they were 3 inches, they would be, as you can see, quite a bit on the stiff side, especially at the rear, which is a little bit nasty, because a stiff rear is not something you really want in a GT3 car usually, because you want to be able to put the power down, and that having the rear end be too stiff usually works against that. The front end being stiffer than is sort of normal is not that unexpected. But yeah, let's go with 2. And the so yeah, we can easily see that there's absolutely no way around it. We have to increase the slow or the rebound rates. So I tried some values, and at the front I actually quickly noticed that I need to completely max out the settings to get even close. So let's put in the max values, which are 23550 and where is it? 10250, yeah, there. So yeah, at the front end, if we completely max out the rebound damping, we get just barely hitting that, crossing the line there. So we get 59% front rebound rate at 3 inches per second with completely maxed out front rebound damping. If the dampers have 3 inches per second for rebound, then of course things are a bit better. We get into the 73% and we are actually quite nice there. But 2 inches, just barely enough for the default springs, and if you use any stiffer springs you will again run into trouble. So yeah, as Casey said, the car could really benefit from stiffer damping, so yeah, this is the reason why. You basically need to max out the front end rebound, and let's check the rear end, 13,600 and 5,900. So yeah, with the rear end we don't actually need to go quite as wild, we don't even nearly need to max it out, but we do need to increase it quite significantly to get within working ranges. But yeah, this is the one of the problems with the R8 with the default. It's many people have commented that the R8 is somewhat bouncy to drive with the default setup, and I definitely agreed, but after I maxed out the rebound at the front and increased the rebound at the rear to the current figures I have here, it became a lot better and not nearly as bouncy and a much more settled car. So yeah, increasing the rebound damping in the car helps it a lot. So yeah, this is once again one of the things you can do with it. You can try to help locate weird things. If the car is behaving oddly, you can try putting in the values to see directly if something is off with the car. And this time it looks like it was the rebound damping to a large extent. And finally, I think we'll do a quick look through for the street dampers with the RGT8, because I have worked with that the most, and it has the added benefit that Casey wrote out what the digression is for that R, and they would be 2 inches per second for everything else except the rear rebound damping, which is 3 inches per second. So RGT8, for my setups, when I did them, I used 44 front springs and 113 rear springs, so I get roughly 2 Hz at the front, which is about right for a really stiff sports car these days. Well, at least on the stiffer end, and 10% higher rear rate, which, as we discussed in the earlier video, is something that a street car should have, a higher rear rate. I think the 911 GT3 RS has something like 20% higher, but I made this sort of a bit more track focused or something like that. Just yada yada yada, basically. And well, of course, at the moment these are still using the racing car damping rate, so I need to actually put in the ones I used. But by going through the slider values and trying all of them, I ended up with something like this: 400, 900, 200, 2000, and 11,000, 3,600, 650, and 2,750. So yeah, and if we see what happens for the street, yeah, again, these street values are just these values here, but in graph form. So yeah, what can we see is that despite the lower digression knee here, we get pretty damn close to our aim here. It's a bit below and it goes a bit over the top at the faster end, but it's sort of an extreme car, so I'm willing to forgive it for being too stiff at being a bit stiff over bumps at high speeds. And the problem with the bump setting here, as you can see, we are stiffer than the sort of guideline here. The problem was that I think I was using the softest possible fast setting, and if I used a softer slow setting, I either was using the softest slow setting as well, which means that no matter what, I'm stuck with it, or that the next lower slow bump setting was already way too low, and I was significantly below the guideline. And considering it's a high-end performance car, I'm really I'd rather make it too stiff than too soft. At the rear end, it went a bit in reverse. I hit the bump setting pretty much spot on, and was really happy about that. I really don't, a rear heavy car hitting bumps, I really don't want damping being too stiff to throw the rear end around. And since the rear rebound digression knee is 3 inches, it's really easy to adjust. You just try to find the closest value you can to this setting here. So the closest value I could find was 11,000, and I think it's still above it, but I think the one below it was under 9,000, 8,500 or something like that, which would have been way too soft. So again, I made it, rather than making it too soft, I made it a bit too stiff. But yeah, it's not too far ahead, and at least the rear end will settle down quickly after bumps. So yeah, this is basically it. The process is an extension of the old one. You pick the car from the list, you pick the springs, either write them in yourself, so you can use the drop-down menus, but if I'm honest, most of the values are getting out of date already because they keep changing all the time, and I really don't have the time to update them all the time. But anyway, you can just write in 150 or 44 or whatever. It'll work anyway. So you really don't need the drop-down list. Yeah, pick the car, pick the springs, check the setup you have for the slow rebound, fast rebound, slow bump, fast bump for both front and rear, and then fiddle around with the digression knees. If 1, 2 or 3, if you can make the graphs look nice with 2 inches per second on everything, or 3 inches per second on everything, or 1 inch per second on everything, then it's quite likely that that's what the car is using. But I really use the 2-inch setting as a general guideline. You probably won't get way too stiff or way too off base with that one, and you can avoid getting your car way too soft as well. Basically, try to make a setting. Set the digression is 2 and try different damping rates for all of these, and if you can come up with a setup that works with both 2-inch digression knees and 3-inch digression knees, then that will probably be pretty good no matter what. So yeah, that's the basic workflow with this. As I said, you can use it for trying to drive down handling issues. If there's something that's clearly odd in the graphs, you can pinpoint it here. You can use it to adjust your dampers after you've changed your springs, and you can basically use it to do the same job that these all do over here, except that you have the added fidelity of the digression knee, so you can handle cars that you can more accurately handle the cars that are using digression knees that are lower down than 3 inches per second, so that you don't end up with too softly damped cars, which I think quite a few people don't like. But yeah, I think that's about it for this time. Please, if you have any questions, just post them in the thread and I'll try my best at answering them. If anyone can find any use for this, or if anyone can get useful results out of this, I'd like to hear from you. And personally, I think it's helped me a lot with several of the cars. And yeah, overall I just say that try to don't try anything too fancy. Just follow the steps and play around it for a bit. And yeah, if you need any help, just ask and I'll answer if I can. It's quite a bit more in-depth tool than the previous portion, but so the video is also longer because of that. But it's also quite a bit more powerful at actually predicting what is really going to happen with the car. But yeah, I think that's about it for this time. I'm uploading this while the video uploads, so you'll have the latest version of pretty much everything I've done so far. Yeah. Thanks for watching, and bye!